welcome. It's October 14th. The theme for our webinar today will be economic diversification, purpose, progress, and prospects with the presenter Justin Riemer from what was Western Economic Diversification, with panelists Peter Josty from Thesis, Alice Koenig from the Haskayne School of Business at the University of Calgary, Eric Newell, who probably needs no introduction, but formerly an advocate within the oil and gas industry, now retired, but has much to share about history and where the overall industry is and is going. And a special guest, Brian Felesky, who's a philanthropist, a lawyer, been involved in corporate governance, and recently has dove in deeply into the relevance of innovation and how we might become more champions of innovation in the province of Alberta anyway. I also want to cite that we have an economic diversification survey underway, which is the foundation of much of what the KEI network has been doing and will be doing into the future. For those of you who haven't completed the survey, I urge you to do so. So our objectives today are to look at the purpose, look at the progress that's been made, and also cite maybe opportunities for prospects. The panel will be introducing themselves individually as I call on them, but to kick this off, I've asked Justin Riemer, the ADM of, well, I'll let you take it from there, Justin.
Sure, Carly.
Thanks very much, Perry, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to see all of you here. This is my second time at one of your forums, Perry. I'm pleased to be here with so many friends that I've worked with in the past, and really appreciate being part of this esteemed panel that you've put together from people that I've worked with and learned from over my career. As Perry mentioned, I am the Assistant Deputy Minister of what is now called Prairie's Economic Development Canada. It used to be Western Economic Diversification, which was around for 34 years. The government has split us with BC and created a new agency in BC called Pacific Economic Development Canada. And we are now focused on the prairies, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, which is affording us more resources and a mandate to be more than just a passive funder in terms of activities that we engage in, but much more of a proactive economic development thought leader, advisor, pathfinder, and convener in the province, and in the process of expanding offices right now into Fort McMurray, Grand Prairie, and Lethbridge. So an exciting time to be part of that organization. The other thing I would say is most of you I've come across in various walks, but I have over 25 years of experience doing economic development in this province, largely from the provincial lens, but more recently in the federal lens. And what a privilege and honor it's been to be in a province like this for the economic roller coaster ride that we've been on over the past 25 years, and to be a part of a lot of big decisions that both government and industry have made over those past 25 years. So I'm going to start off the discussion. I'm just doing a bit of a warm-up teaser to the real learned wisdom that's in the room, and hopefully get a great discussion going on here. I'm going to submit that diversification isn't as important as you think it is. And why I say that is, we've all been talking and hearing about diversification in this province ad nauseum for many decades. And one thing that I often reflect on is that the most diversified province in Canada is Manitoba. And the goal for us should not be, we want to be like Manitoba. We actually want to aspire to something greater than that. And so I actually like the term resiliency, that we should be driving towards a more resilient economy and building off our competitive and comparative strengths, just like every other jurisdiction is trying to do, just like every business tries to do, in building off their competitive and comparative advantages. So throughout my career, when we've been developing economic development strategies, what we've been focused on is how to build off our strengths. And I will submit that our number one strength in this province isn't our natural resources, it's our talent. It's our entrepreneurial culture
Sure.
in this province. And if you measure that, and it's hard to measure, and the best person in the room to measure that is Peter Josty, and he's going to tell you about how he's measured it in various instances. And I've had the privilege of working with him for a number of years on this. It's hard to measure because it's an intangible, but you know it when you see it. And if you look at, other jurisdictions and just sort of the culture that we have, we were at the lowest of the lows last year through COVID, through negative oil prices. I told a lot of people that in my 25 years of experience, I've never seen Alberta as economically depressed and just at the rock bottom than it was last year for a number of reasons. And look what's happened already in a year. We're going to be leading the country in economic growth. I don't see many other provinces with as many economic opportunities as Alberta has from a variety of instances. I've seen a lot of people go to BC over the past year. We've lost a lot of talent. People are climate shopping, and because they can work mobile, they're going to other jurisdictions. And when I go into BC, I see agri-food and tourism. I don't see much else going on there. When I look at Alberta and I think of all the opportunities we have in clean tech, hydrogen, petrochemicals that are billions of dollars just being invested in on our natural gas, agri-food, lots of vertical farming and all kinds of innovative new approaches being talked about in agriculture. Our digital sector is exploding like never before. We've doubled our venture capital investment in the sector. We've doubled our digital companies in this sector over the past 3 years. It's a hidden success that not many people know about. Our health and life sciences is growing like crazy. We have all kinds of diversified opportunities. So Alberta is diversifying. In fact, our most successful times of diversifying are when oil and gas crash rock bottom prices, and you can track the diversification that comes through just necessity. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the other thing I'd submit to you, which is interesting in doing a little bit of homework for this, is Alberta currently has the most diversified labor market in Canada. So we don't have the most diversified economy, but we have the most diversified labor market when you think about people working in different sectors and different fields. And isn't that a mark of resilience, where people have different skills and different sectors that they're focused on and different expertise? So we still rely heavily on one resource as an economy, and that's a problem. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. It's relied on less so than it was perhaps 10, 20 years ago. But there are a lot of opportunities to build off that foundation of hydrocarbon wealth that we have.
Let me pick up on the resilience.
Sure.
I'm absolutely delighted because
Sure.
I think that's a breakthrough in thinking over the last 20 years, is that diversification itself is not the objective. It's the resistance to shocks, the capability to weather a shock, whether it be the price of oil or something going on in the regulation of trade, blah, blah, blah. The second one is the capacity to recover quickly, which you've commented on already. But the challenge we have is, yes, we may in fact be diversified, but so many of our industries, professions, and public services are still correlated with what's happening to the price of oil. So the challenges will be, we're making progress, but we're not there yet. If we were, you wouldn't have a job, right?
Right. Agreed. Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, very good point, Barry. So yeah, absolutely. Really good point. So there wasn't much else. One of the discussions I'd like to provoke and get thoughts on too is the role of government in enabling diversification, which is a really fascinating topic.
Alice, why don't you jump in right there? I had a chance to touch on Alice's interest early. You've just woken up the first comment from our panelists. Go ahead, Alice.
Yes, so role of government, very important. And I think what we often do is we mix up issues around supporting entrepreneurship and then just spreading the money around without any thought about the rules of the game. So throwing money at a problem versus thinking thoughtfully about structuring infrastructure. What do we need to have in place so that the entrepreneurs in the room can move forward rather than creating barriers to moving forward? So I see a lot of enthusiasm, but not a lot of clarity about where where government can have the most leverage. So yeah, that's my initial thought. I'll give you an example of something. I just read this paper this week. Apparently, when immigrants come into the country, we have lots of great programming for immigrants. And, they even learn how to skate. They get opportunities to go to theater, participate in cultural events, because we want to integrate them as quickly as possible into our culture. What I discovered is that there is lots of support for getting them integrated into the job market. There is zero support for integrating immigrants into our entrepreneurial culture and into doing startups, unless they come in as entrepreneurs, so under that special immigrant program. To me, this is utterly shocking, because if I think about my parents, for example, coming in with the educational credentials that were never valid in Canada, et cetera, and it took 15 years before someone said to my father, start your own business, and he immediately doubled his income. And I wonder how many immigrants and skilled people we're leaving out because our government program is pushing them towards kind of standard jobs instead of pushing them towards entrepreneurialism.
Good point. Anyone want to jump in right there? I mean, Peter, your background has certainly been entrepreneurs and innovation. And Eric, you've been picking up on what Careers the Next Generation is striving to do. Any comments you want to share with Alice?
We did a study of immigrant entrepreneurs a number of years ago. And what we found was that the rate of entrepreneurship among first generation Canadians was a little bit higher than the Canadian average. And then we looked at the second generation, and their rate of entrepreneurship was significantly lower. And the reason for that is if you're an immigrant, what do you want your kids to grow up to be? You want them to grow up to be doctors and lawyers and things like that, who are not typically seen as entrepreneurs. So it's one of the dynamics of that situation. The first generation are very entrepreneurial, but second generation, much less so.
I'll add a point, Alice, you might want to pick up on that. When the survey work shows almost consistently since 2015 that when people are asked about the role of government, they zero in on policy and regulations. They talk a little bit about trade negotiations. They're negative about government getting heavy into procurement, but that's certainly an opportunity to help advance entrepreneurship and innovation. But second to policy is doing whatever they can to advance the relevance of SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses. They see that as the engine of innovation, while the larger organizations are driven more by the status quo and harvesting while the sun is shining. But it appears that entrepreneurship is really the driver of innovation, which is critical for diversification. You want to jump in on this any further, Justin?
Well,
or
Peter, do you have any data to address that specific issue?
Yeah, I do. But I think Peter.
No. I'm wondering about Peter Josty, because
on the immigration side. Let's get that survey to Alice. Peter? Yep, you're frozen. Oh, you're there.
No, I'm still here.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking more about the government support issues and stuff like that, because that's also in Peter's data.
Yeah, Perry, it's Eric. I would like to comment. I'm not disagreeing with what Alice was saying. In fact, I see a lot of wasted training dollars and everything. But with Careers of the Next Generation, it's definitely a very tight private-public sector partnership, and it's private industry led. But we are very targeted. I mean, last year, despite COVID, we got a staff of about 54 now, but we actually placed 1,500 apprentices and new interns in very good jobs. It took us, we had to recruit 825 employers to do it. And we've been very successful, and we've been given some extra funding targeted. And we are going to try to get that figure to 6,000 new apprentices and interns every year. And that's a huge challenge. But the reality is, if we don't do it, and I guess our current government takes a lot of credit, but and especially our premier, but he really understands apprenticeship and has supported them on getting real results. But if we don't do it, 6,000 a year will not even match the the retirements that we got. So we, but it's targeted very well. And we have actually 5 deputy ministers that are on the board. I've had them for 23 years now, and about 15 senior executives, many at the CEO level. And so there it is targeted, and it gets very big results. Like of those 1,500, we have a huge Indigenous program. 300 of them were from Indigenous communities, went way beyond what we thought we could do ourselves. That's 20%. And we have over 5% of our apprentices in Alberta now are Indigenous. And
let's pick up on another theme. Thank you, Eric. Another theme, and that was transition. We are making headway, but this word transition comes up routinely, certainly around the oil and gas industry. Transitions just don't happen.
No.
One of the drivers of transition is shock. And as you pointed out, Justin, there's a silver lining off of the shock, because it does force people to wake up to the fact that where their jobs were or where their economy was ain't where it is in the future, and they need to adjust and adapt. So do you want to comment at all about what is going on or what needs to go on in terms of transition in this province's economy? And
Sure.
And why?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So, a lot of it is understanding long-term market fundamentals, and that is sometimes a challenge. We've been working with the post-secondaries and talking to them for a number of years now about making sure that we understand the skills for the future, and that we're teaching and training for skills for the future. And pleased to see the government moving and post-secondaries moving to more work-integrated learning for all disciplines, for all faculties, so that co-op programs aren't just the domain of the engineering sector, but are the domain of others. It's a really smart talent retention strategy too, because we're losing our young people when they graduate. They don't have a home here, they don't have a job, and they're moving away, and we're losing our young people. We never used to have that problem in Alberta. We have that problem right now.
You're losing your old people too, Justin.
Yeah, that too.
Well, they're also scared. The survey work that we've done with Alberta youth, other than mental health, which came in second, and issues of immigration and inclusion, the biggest issue they had was technology and the future of work.
Yeah. So what we've seen, and I'll just focus specifically on the tech industry as an example, is we're turning out a lot of youth that have computer programming and other training, but it's not necessarily what industry needs. And there's a huge amount of jobs available right now in the tech sector, particularly in Calgary and some other places. And they're having to recruit elsewhere, because you can work virtually on this stuff, or bring in immigrants from other areas, because they need the right kind of skill sets to supply their particular needs. One of the programs that I'm really a big fan of that Calgary Economic Development led is called the Edge Up program. And it specifically targeted disaffected oil and gas workers to reskill them to work in the tech industry. I think it was a 6-month program. They had one cohort. They had a 97% placement rate. We need to have much more targeted short-term reskilling programs like that developed in a hurry to keep our people here, to move from one sector to another sector where the long-term market fundamentals exist. We got a lot of people working, not working in the tourism sector right now. The tourism sector has got massive talent shortages because of CERB, because we can't bring in Australians right now to work the ski hills. There's a whole bunch of problems there. We need to be focused on the skill trainings and other developments in that space as well. But those are just a couple areas. We need to be way more nimble. And unfortunately, the post-secondary sector hasn't necessarily been as nimble or as quick to adapt as we would like. And the pace of change is way faster than it's ever been before. So we need to get much better at this.
Eric was with me when we met with the president of one of the universities in Alberta. After I had been advisor to the Board of Governors for a while, the president asked me what it is that I had learned in saving a couple of faculties and being involved with the university. And I said, your decision-making in a rapidly changing economy is too slow.
Yeah.
Remember that, Eric? He was offended. I don't know why he asked the question, because he was offended.
I would support that. For universities are slower than colleges. I've had
Yeah.
I've seen some pretty proactive colleges like
Yeah.
Yale College.
No,
and
that's right.
they-
But this should be an opportunity for private sector. If the university is too slow, the end result should be that their market, the students, those that are graduated, those that are coming, get frustrated and look for other alternatives, which is those that are offering actual work experience, et cetera.
Let me jump in a little
I can
bit from
go
a
ahead, Alice.
university perspective. It takes 2 years, as much as 2 years, to get a new program approved by Edmonton. I ask you, why are we asking Edmonton to approve university programs? Why aren't the universities given that responsibility within our economy? It would shave off about 6 to 9 months for sure.
What's the
So this is an example where,
That's
and I don't
crazy.
see what the government adds to this process. I really don't.
Go ahead, Kevin. What do you?
I could
I
be
mean,
wrong, though. I could be wrong.
That's something that, as a recent university graduate, I'm blown away by, because I had no idea that the actual municipality had a role in approving or
Not the
vetting.
municipality, the
It's
federal, the provincial government.
Well, Edmonton, you were saying something.
Yeah, sorry, down here in Calgary, that's a metaphor for
Oh,
provincial
okay,
government.
okay.
At
Gotcha.
least you didn't say Redmonton. I used to get that.
I
all
didn't
the
say
time.
that.
Okay, I understand better now.
Brian,
So,
you
yeah, I'll take back.
that.
It is a red tape issue. We have noted over and over again that the role of government should be in policy. And if this is policy, they ought to be nimble at it. And clearly, in a rapidly changing economy, adjustments are called for. The institution should be putting more pressure on the university to give it more latitude.
Yeah.
We'll go from there.
Time is the only resource we cannot make more of. And that comes from multiple perspectives. And the rest of the world, I'm coming from sorry, I came late. I've known Perry for a few years. Recent University of Alberta graduate, PhD, biomedical.
I didn't give him permission to come late, though.
Yeah, no, he didn't. I was on a Zoom call dealing with
That's okay.
dealing with some stuff. But it's but iterating is really an adapting. I mean, I'm in the Bay Area with my startup, as well as I have a startup here that sort of mirrors. And I look at the two environments, and I've lived in San Francisco Bay Area for 10 years now, and it is dramatically different. And I know can't all be Silicon Valley, but certainly the leadership of an area, when they say they actually want to do something and go somewhere, can orient their policies to actually make that happen instead of actively detract from those things happening. The world, I can't believe it. We're on the precipice of some major transformations in human nature as well as human policies. And I just hope we're talking about the right topics.
Well, for sure, there are those at the table today that understand that shocks are not going to go away, that the rate of change driven by emerging technologies and by some of the changing attitudes of youth are very significant. I must say that in the last few weeks, one of the things that was consistently coming up was that youth are less concerned with issues of privacy, trust, and government intervention.
They don't care. They don't care. They're living in a transparent society where everything that they have, all their picks, everything, privacy to them, it's don't hurt me is privacy.
I share it with you because that is a shock to those that have lived within an environment where the status quo and maintaining it or administering it, not managing it, was sort of the driving force. We've spent a lot of time on talent, and I don't think it's going to go away. I'm going to call on Brian for two reasons. One, he's raising his hand. Hopefully that isn't going to go to the washroom. But Brian, your world has been the world of finance. We haven't talked at all, other than I think Justin mentioning he's had a budget that we should smile at. But what have your views on the relevance of financing for diversifying an economy?
I'm happy to speak to that, but I just want to pick up on a couple points. We were talking about immigration, and as we know, we have a falling birth rate in Canada and particularly in Alberta, and we have a falling birth rate in the developed world. So there's a huge competition for talented immigrants, and we need them desperately. And so Justin, the Canadian government, Western Economic Development, has to get involved in how can we better incent people to come to Canada. And one of the challenges, as we all know, is we get these professionals who do get lined up from time to time that we get, And then the anecdotal
Thing.
is they're driving a cab, and if you have a heart attack in the cab, that's like the best place to have it because you got a cardiac driving a cab. We are desperately shorting professionals coming to the country and getting credentials as professionals. Now, I just a little shout out for an organization used to be called the Immigration Access Society and now called Windmill. And it is a private, non-profit, started here in Calgary, it's now across the country, that provides microloans to credential professionals, engineers, architects, medics, and the like. And we get a modest amount of money from the provincial government, a modest money from the federal government. And if that program, or saying we can provide guidance and microloans and get you credentialed expeditiously in Canada, and never mind being a janitor or a landscaper or a taxi driver, it would be a big attractor and a big advertising piece for Canada to build up talented immigration inventory, which is a desperate need. I just want to leave that thought with you, Justin, and anytime you want to talk about that piece, the previous government authorized $40 million for the program, and then the current government canceled the program. So we're back relying on the provinces and the goodwill of so many philanthropists across the country. On the talent development side, again, another shout out, we should celebrate David Bissett. As you know, gave $30 million and he's out raising another $70 million for the digital training program at SAIT, which I think, and a lot of people think will be transformational in terms of processing people with that talent to meet the demands of the growing innovation sector. Sorry to take up the airspace, but I just want to get those 2 points in before I speak to finance. One of the things that we've done, and when I say we, the royal we, a group of about 44 of us, which I had kind of slipped by default into being the chair of, have studied how can we transform the province's economy into a more technical, a more innovative economy. And as several of you know, and certainly Western Economic Development knows, we commissioned a big study as to who is the best models in the world. Is it Austin, Texas? Is it Tel Aviv? Is it Denmark, South Korea, and whatever? So we got the study of 33 countries in the world. 33 pages of a number of countries in the world, best models. And then we translated that into shovel-ready recommendations for the government. And we've had a number of interactions with the government on it, but their focus on COVID is such that it hasn't moved very fast and very far, and we're very disappointed. But on the finance side, for you talented people and thoughtful and creative people, one of our major proposals, as we examine the landscape in North America, there is in Europe lots of non-dilutive funds, i.e. funds that are available to sponsor entrepreneurship and technical companies, innovative companies, and make equity available on a non-dilutive basis. And Israel and South Korea and Denmark are the leaders in that regard. And as a result, they've attracted all kinds of technology companies to their boundaries because you can't get the damn money unless you're based in that jurisdiction. The good news, the great opportunity for Canada and for Alberta is there is no non-dilutive equity fund operating in North America. So it's an open landscape. And we verily believe that with starting with $500 million and moving to $1 billion in short order, we would not only accelerate organic development of technology companies in Alberta, but we sure as hell would be attractive to international companies to relocate, and North American companies or national companies to locate to the province of Alberta if we offered a mega fund on a non-dilutive basis. And in that context, we all know that the Silicon Valley is losing out to Austin, Texas. because it provides a more vibrant, more percolating, and more exciting music and arts developed environment. And so it won't surprise you that a critical part of our ambition, of course, is not only to develop the financial side, but also to develop the complementary side of arts, percolation, vibrancies, to complement where these young, talented kids want to go. And they're leaving the Valley, as you know, in droves to go to jurisdictions that provide that.
So Brian, Kevin's been in Silicon Valley. You're certainly familiar. We're all familiar with Silicon Valley. I mean, it's had a 50-year run, if not longer. We're relatively young. One might use that as somewhat of an excuse. We're a relatively young province. People are more engaged in wealth creation and family raising than in in wealth reinvestment. I always have been curious with the aging population on why we don't have incentives for the society to be investing their wealth in the economy instead of giving it away in taxes or some wealth transfer. And I am concerned that the amount of funds that are going to be transferred as the baby boomers leave the system is going to become very attractive to government. And we're going to find in Canada a wealth transfer tax instead of the building of a non-dilutive equity fund. Is there anything we can do in Alberta or in Canada in general to get the citizens themselves to realize the opportunities in the future are theirs, but we need to invest in Canada and our entrepreneurships, not in government bureaucraats?
Issue a cryptocurrency coin for a new fund that everybody funnels their resources to. And that bypasses an awful lot of all of that.
Okay, well, send me an ad, but Justin, you might want to jump in here on the relevance, or Barry. I'm wide open for input on this one. I have been told that the amount of money that actually could be taxed is minuscule and it wouldn't be relevant. But anyone who's given thought to getting citizens themselves to become the champions, the investors of our future.
So I can weigh in on this. I like your thinking, Perry. I can't get into the nuances of the taxation element, but one of the areas we've been really pushing within our organization is co-op level investment in rural communities, where we're enabling and facilitating people that can help organize co-op investment so that residents in rural areas can invest in things that are going to support their communities on a co-op based model. I think that's a tool that works best, I think, in rural areas. It's not to say it can't work in urban environments as well, but we haven't leveraged that enough, and it's not part of our cultural ethos to engage in those kinds of projects. And you need amalgamators or facilitators to often engage it, and there's very few people that do it well. So we have a co-op association of Alberta. We've funded them to begin training and hands-on practical training in different areas across the province, and we're seeing some success from that. So that's another model where citizens can reinvest in community infrastructure to support their well-being.
Ryan, you want to comment on that?
No, I think that's very thoughtful. The social attraction and lifestyle we're seeing across the US, for example, people are moving to Omaha, Nebraska, of all places, because of the cost of lifestyle and the opportunity for family upbringing. And remote working has made that very feasible. So we would be attracting people to Alberta, just to complement thoughtful dialogue, not only to live here, enjoy this wonderful environment, but to work remotely for other enterprises wherever the hell they are. In many cases, they would be working for people in the Valley because they can't renew their H-1B visas, as it's becoming increasingly more difficult to do so in the US. And so that's a great opportunity for us. And I'm proud to say, and many of you know, that two of the most dynamic talent recruiting companies in certainly the country are located both here in Calgary. Mob Squad and Irfan Raji is doing a hell of a job, and the talent that we're recruiting to Canada is extraordinary. And likewise, Sean Lockendo with GTA is doing the same, which Justin brings a point up, and for you involved, our immigration constraints in Alberta and salary thresholds are so anachronistic relative to where we are today. We have to pay immigrants in Calgary 20 to 30% more, or in Alberta, 20-30% more than the rest of Canada, because of the historic wage differential that we enjoyed in the past, and today have deteriorated all to hell, and yet we still have that penalty. And as a result, these two companies, Mop Squad and GTA, are recruiting talent for extraordinary people outside of Alberta because they can't meet the wage competition. That is a threshold, and it's a tragedy that that isn't changed.
I agree, Brian. That's an issue I'm aware of, and we need to rectify that. Agreed.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, just as a comment here, someone unmuted, you don't have to listen to me if you're muted right now. Someone is unmuted that has background, either a radio or a commentator going on, and if they could just check and see if that's in your office.
Yeah, that may be me. I'll just check that.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Maybe close your door. That might resolve it. In any case, Gordon, you're relatively new to the table. Our green and white striped shirt guy. What's your perspective about what the challenges are to diversify this economy, whether it be youth financing, innovation, the ecosystem? Share with us your perspective.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me to speak. I just sat down at the table. I was kind of, just before I got here, is right at the Alberta, Saskatchewan, or sorry, the Montana, Saskatchewan border, and I just got back up to Saskatoon right now. So I am in Saskatchewan right now. And I guess
were you able to cross the border?
No, I was just in Coronach, just about 10 miles away from the Montana border, so I didn't have to go across.
Okay.
But I was, but anyway, so I'm back up in Saskatchewan. We had a major snowstorm down here, so things are just crazy these days. But anyways, on a bit of history, I did take interest in this topic today, because many years ago, during the Allison Redford government, I was on the board of directors for the Edmonton Chamber, but I also chaired the Economic Diversification Task Force. And it was, and so the task force that we got in Edmonton was made up of some very energetic, keen, business leaders, from the oil and gas sector and around. And we did come up with a plan, well, first, study the background and come up with a plan for promoting and enhancing economic diversification. That was about, what, 10 years ago or something like that. Can't remember. But it was seen that, Alberta had too many of its eggs in the petrochemical industry. And they said, that's precarious. If something ever happens to that, we're in trouble, eh? And so, everyone was quite on board with trying to kind of break out of it. And we did. I actually have a host of recommendations. We did bring it back to the Edmonton Chamber, but the chair of the chamber at that time was closely connected to the premier, and the premier's office gave us the direction. And I don't know why she was even kind of providing direction to the chamber, but she was. And it was that Alberta at that time had no interest in economic diversification. They wanted economic development around the oil and gas industry. So I guess to answer your question, it's kind of, I think the biggest challenge is the path of least resistance. Is that when things are going good, and things were probably going good about that time, is probably back in the day of close to $100 barrel oil, and things are ticking along. Why change it? If things are working right. And so I think in my mind, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, and I don't think until recently, Alberta's been up to the point of necessity for the sake of survival. And so there really hasn't been a strong desire on the leadership to change. I think as far as leadership goes, they want quick results, and so economic diversification is a long road ahead. And so they say, well, we don't have the patience for this unless there's a quick win on this thing. We're not in. probably about, I'm wearing the green and white colors here right now, but I used to work for the Saskatchewan government. And, back in the early 90s, I was an employee of the Saskatchewan government when they were almost bankrupt. And so they'd issued all sorts of new stuff, asset management and things like that, which would probably, anything to kind of stretch their pennies farther, and so they're working any trick that they could, to get out of the situation that they're in. And so they were faced with, with necessity being the mother of invention back in the 90s. I don't think Alberta's really seen it yet. Maybe they're seeing it now, and so. I don't know, maybe it just takes that sort of a kick to get going.
I'm going to pick up on that, whether they are seeing it. Again, I'm going to reflect on our survey, which shows a significant difference between Edmonton and Calgary. And it has to do with the makeup of their different economies. The public sector in general is reluctant to change. The industrial sector is very market driven and very responsive to shock. The industries of energy, agriculture, tourism, you name it, have been dramatically affected over the last few years, not just by the negatives of COVID, but by what's happening in logistics, what's happening in emerging countries, what's happening with labor. I mean, you've got to be nimble to survive in industry today. So they're going through shock. Public sector usually lags, because until austerity kicks in, public sector with its large union followings, and Edmonton is dominated by health, education, and government, Edmonton is very slow to pick up on the signals. And I'm not sure that that's changed for a while. So Justin and anyone involved in economics or economic development has the challenge of having to recognize that each industry has its own issue, but each jurisdiction based on geography seems to have its own issues and how to be approached as well. So leadership has to be incredibly adaptive today, unless it's sitting at the top, to try and mobilize those that sit in these various jurisdictions, various industries. So that the challenges that I see is no one program is going to fit all anymore. And that means you've really got to be almost have a network that has regional representation as well as industrial or technology representation to handle the array of challenges that we're facing. Peter, you've done extraordinary survey work that is not targeted at any single industry or any single jurisdiction. Peter Justy, you want to comment at all on that comment that I made about leadership?
Yes, I do. We had a meeting this morning of the Calgary Innovation Coalition, which is a group of economic developers in Calgary. And it also ties back to the role of government and talent development, that recently there's been a lot of investments in accelerators in Alberta, and Justin's group has contributed to that. The provincial government has contributed to that. And this is doing a lot to enhance sort of talent development in growing tech companies. The issue that surfaced this morning, which is a very interesting one, is that in order to feed the funnel, you need a lot of people at the beginning, because there's a lot of fall off between people having the idea they'd like to start a business and actually getting a business crystallized and into some training programs. So it was there's one of the issues is what can we do to excite people in, let's say, K to 12 universities, that there's a career for them in starting a business as opposed to working for the big company. And I think that's an issue we probably haven't talked about enough yet.
I mean, to romance small business is to accept the excitement, but the challenges that go along with entrepreneurship. Ling, you made an observation that immigrants are entrepreneurs in themselves. I mean, they have gone through breakout. They've abandoned, they're not status quo minded. They've had forced upon them a whole new array, a whole new ecosystem, if you will, to have to adapt to. One observation as well, Peter, the survey work that we did about what's working and what's not working in Alberta's innovation ecosystem did not hammer accelerators and infrastructure or resources either. What it hammered was leadership and decision-making processes. It said that the human element of the system, which should be the one we can most adjust to, is the one that we've really got to work on developing. That the relational skills, not the technology, are what are lacking. And commerce is a social endeavor. Entrepreneurship is as much social as it is knowledge and technical. We need to be thinking about training people, not just in the technical knowledge that they're going to need, but in the relational skills that will be required in a world that is being market driven every single day.
Yeah, we see that too, Perry.
Yeah, it's the professions are almost the canary on the mine. The professions are finding that their customers, or called clients in the olden days, one step above a slave in Roman times, the clients are now making decisions. They're educated. They want a relationship. They know there's plenty of professionals out there, any one of which can deliver them the knowledge. But where they are, what they are seeking, and what the professions are finding very difficult to handle is clients have changed. They're becoming shopping consumers, and they're knowledgeable. That affects the retail market as well. And your comment, Gordon, about the chambers, I've got to tell you, it was 20 years ago that one of the chambers, I'll tell you, it was the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, asked me when I was a consultant with KPMG if I could help them prepare their members for e-commerce. Because if you weren't in e-commerce next year, you were going to go out of business. Well, that was 20 years later when COVID hit. The Chamber of Commerce developed a strategy and a series of resolutions on what they could do to help their members get ready. And those resolutions were turned down flat. Why? Because they're constituency driven. Their members were rubber tire retail trade. They were not ready to embrace a new market, a new way of doing business. And so change management, which is what leadership is really all about at the business and economic level. We can put all the resources and all the accelerators in place, but if we don't have people adept at change management at an individual, corporate, and economic level, we will face not the dearth of financing or the dearth of talent, but the dearth of how do you go about managing change? Barry, you were a change manager. You were a deputy minister for a while, or were you all about status quo? And are you today?
The answer is you should ask that question regarding me of Justin, because he's probably the more unbiased individual between anybody else on the panel.
You can ask him.
Yeah. I don't know. Go ahead, Justin.
Barry, I had the pleasure of working under Barry for several years, and a mentor of mine, and he was a change agent and continues to be. So no status quo for Barry.
I like your sweatshirt, Barry.
Me too.
Okay, Eric, I do too. And I worried about that third period last night, but I worry more about what we're faced with in Alberta and in Canada going forward. And all I can say is, Justin, we tried awfully hard to shake loose that rural money that is in everybody's pocket, all the old timers' pockets there, and wish you luck. We didn't get it right anyway, and we did a lot of things that we didn't get quite right, and I think maybe that's part of the answer, and that is I basically had my training from the world's largest multinational in the field that I was in right out of university for 10 years. And it was based in Chicago. And it was under the wise or unwise watch of even the mafia. And you had to do business with them. And that kind of background brought about, I think, the difference between Canadians and Americans and in business. And we try and keep alive things that we should. And Justin, I did it, and I assume you've done it too. Things that we should just step back and let them either flounder or succeed, but get out of the way. And the faster they flounder, the better it is for the economy, not for the individuals, but the Americans honor their failures. We do not.
Yeah.
Well,
Barry, if I
well,
can just
we could-
emphasize that, and I think that's important for the whole discussion. Government's really, really good at starting stuff. It's really, really bad at getting out of stuff.
Well, was my earlier observation when I made reference to the relevance of experience. The Silicon Valley has had 50 to 100 years of it, and we're relatively early. And that experience that I refer to is not the experience of success as much as it is the experience of failure. And what we learn and how we build a mature network that can provide the money marketing management, manpower, moxie mergers and metrics and marriages that are needed in that ecosystem, but it has to have experience in it. And that experience is the experience of winning and losing, that we can help the entrepreneur understand how long that valley of death is, or that journey is, because it isn't just an idea. In fact, the idea is a very minor part of ultimate success.
Mhm.
Maybe a little plug, Perry.
Yeah.
That whole understanding of success and wounds and injury as a part of entrepreneurial success is lines up with a program that we're proudly involved in, and that's called Intergen, that some of you might be familiar with. There is so many very talented professionals in Calgary, especially. They're on the street. They've been early retired. They don't want to golf 5 days a week, and they're looking for an opportunity, and they'll never get re-engaged in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
But we've got all kinds of young entrepreneurs with their enterprises that could use that senior input,
Mhm.
that sense of resilience, and how the hell do you put together a pitch book, and how do you market, and who are the contacts that might be available. And so we've got this big platform that's like plenty of fish, where we match senior talent that's registered on one side and entrepreneurs on the other side. And thank you to Western Economic Development, who is a major sponsor of that. We've been matchmaking and then training up entrepreneurs and training up senior people who you might come out of the Treasury Department of CNRL, but you don't know a hell of a lot about technology development. And so we're cultivating both sides, and that experience has been terrific. And statistically, there's a program in St. Louis, Missouri that's been operating for a long time. And they've been able to establish that if you match senior talent with innovative young entrepreneurs, the chances of success are 65% better than it would be if you left those entrepreneurs to make their way through the quagmire of entrepreneurship. And
Yeah.
it's a very uplifting, and we just want to leave that with you as helping people who are entrepreneurs have the seasoning of the senior experience. And it's beautiful to watch, and the testimonials that we're getting back is really uplifting.
Well, I like that from two perspectives, Brian. One that is often ignored is the need to train angels.
Very true. Very true.
We've got a lot of devils out there, and that doesn't do a damn thing to help the entrepreneur have faith or confidence or trust that the source of finance is right for them. But in order to build a sophisticated and trusting market, we need to pay as much attention to the need to develop angels, and that is the early stage financing of small businesses, as we do preparing the entrepreneurs. Alice, you were nodding your head there. Is there something that
Yeah, I'll just share that because it's not just a question of getting angels, but getting angels across the spectrum of our society. So Haskins School of Business has been working with the 51. We launched Financial Feminism last spring. We're doing it again this fall. And that involves 20 to 30 women from across the country and encouraging them to become business angels. And it's really a combination of soft skills and hard skills. Most of them are self-made entrepreneurs with their own funds to invest. But I think there's a lot of room for this kind of development, both in terms of the wealth transfer that you were talking about, Perry, but also in terms of this intergenerational flow of ideas and support. We know that women entrepreneurs are less likely to get support. There's a lot of built-in systemic bias. I know of one venture capital fund in Toronto that does not do live pitches because they know that that's where the bias operates. And so they are investing without pitches, but with lots of documentation, obviously, and finding themselves actually investing in a broader spectrum of entrepreneurs, a broader spectrum of companies. I think that's fascinating. I think we can do a whole lot to grow our economy if we don't just think about how do we change what is, but if we can engage a broader spectrum of our society in these really important activities, as you say, Perry, the angels, getting more angels into our economy.
Well, I think we've recognized the indigenous population could certainly benefit and is thirsting because there is some financing there to get involved and make the right decisions for the long term. Brian, you might want to check me on this.
I think you're right.
I'm well aware of a company in Alberta that has really zeroed in on women as entrepreneurs and investors and holds an annual conference and bring 1,000 women that all get up in their gala outfits. And the place, it's an extraordinary experience if you haven't been to it, but Raintree Financial runs an annual gala event for women. And it's really all about showing them what entrepreneurs are all about and trying to entice them into the exercise. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, no, very good for you to make that point. And Brad Zumwalt and Terry Rock are just doing a hell of a job in that regard. And also a big, picking up what Alice had to say, I have to give the Haskayne School a big kudos for being instrumental in the initiation of the creative destruction labs at U of C. And the creative destruction labs, I think, has been by gender. I mean, we have no perceivable bias to men or women, and it's just wonderful to see how many women are parading on that podium and hands go up to invest with them. It's all very exciting. And Alice Riemer, of course, is a giant organizer and CEO of CDL, brings that feminine energy to the table. So it's a very positive element. And in Intergen, we have a great staff, and the top three are all women. We're proud to say.
Thank you. We've got about a half hour. I'm going to ask Greg McGilvery to give a little bit of an advertisement here. You mentioned Terry Rock, and that's why I've thought about this. Greg, you're going to be facilitating next week's webinar, which will be on a Wednesday. It'll be one of the rare opportunities we've changed the date. But who's Terry Rock, and what do you have in mind for next week?
And I'm going to step out for a minute. Thanks.
Okay, hurry back. Okay, Greg.
We're doing, I'm a facilitator. I help experts work better together. And it just absolutely baffles me how we can have so many smart people with such passion for innovation and not seem to get anywhere together. And that question's been on my mind for the better part of the last 15 years in private practice as a strategist. I was just asked to run a webinar next week by Barry, 90 minutes, no big deal, a few speakers suggested. And we now currently have about 25 questions that I would like people to think about around talking about what we're calling the Alberta innovation ecosystem. The innovation process, from the men and women in white jackets through to commercialization, that's a process. There's also this complex ecosystem of so many players across Alberta, across our cities, in our municipalities, some that take a provincial view, some that take a federal view, and we're not all working together. In fact, I would argue many of us aren't even aware of one another. So rather than going down rabbit holes next week, we're going to be focusing on the Alberta innovation ecosystem as a forest and ask people attending whether we have the right questions in mind if we seek to understand it. Starting with the end in mind, it is hoped that we could work together to make it better.
And who do you have lined up as panelists?
For speakers?
Yeah.
We have Terry with Platform Calgary,
okay.
Michael Robinson with Haskayne, and one of our guests here today, Ling Huang, who's going to provide a bit of a international and national perspective on innovation.
Okay.
And then it'll be engaged conversation on if we're looking to understand and improve this system, are these the right questions to answer?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great intro there.
Perry, I was going to just ask, there's only one person probably under the age of 40 on my screen that doesn't have any gray hair, and young mechanical and electrical engineer, Yi-Tong Wu.
Yeah.
And I would just like to know what someone under the age of 40, assuming I got that right, thinks about this conversation around innovation. Hearing all these old men and women talk.
Tong, you're muted if you wish to speak up. We'd be more than delighted to hear what you have to share with us. Go ahead.
Thanks. So thanks, Perry, for inviting me to this event. So basically, yeah, I'm currently an EIT student. I'm doing my Master of Engineering degree in electrical engineering. So it has been like pretty tough to find a job, I would say, at this moment. So yeah, so I think it's not even easy for, so it's not even like hard for traditional students to find jobs. It's also like very hard for co-ops to find jobs. So even if you have, let's say 20 months of intern, so you are still going to facing like major difficulties when finding jobs. So yeah, so most employers would prefer to kind of see whether you kind of have those skills or those internships. So that's their primary focus. And yeah, and in recent years, I guess the economy is kind of in a declining state. So it's going to be like very hard to find a job. So yeah, based on my prediction, the employment rates for new graduates around 20%. Well, it should be like 5% to 20%. So that's kind of my prediction here. So yeah, so it's predicted based on the ratio between EIT, the EIT and PEng. So the EIT is around 20%, and the PEng it's the PEng has around 80% of the total engineering population in Alberta. However, in most companies, the ratio between EIT and PEng is 1 to 20. So that's why there's going to be like a 15% of gap. So that means like 7,500 people, EIT people, are not finding or are not being like employed at this moment. So, and there are like a lot of new grads, or maybe people who graduated a couple of years, they didn't really actually register for EIT. So
I've got two questions for you. One is, would you ever consider becoming an entrepreneur, and that is starting a business on your own?
Well, yeah, I'm actually too young for that. So yeah, I think if I want to be an entrepreneur, I think I do have to have a certain amount of work experiences. For example, let's say there are like some PEng, they actually build their own consulting companies, but they do need to have like around 10 years or 20 years of experiences. So experiences are definitely needed for those PEng.
Are you in your program taking any management courses?
Yeah, I did take a couple of management courses, but it's still gonna be like a bit hard to actually use those knowledge to build those to build like a company or so, because those so if you don't really have those relative engineering experiences, it's going to be like very hard to have a good understanding for those knowledge you learned in the class. So yeah, I would assume it's yeah, there are like some tangible skills that you can't really obtain without like having a job first.
Yep, thank you.
Can I weigh in here, Perry, for a second?
Go ahead, please. Yes.
So just on a couple things, I'm a PEng as well, and I sympathize for you, and I kind of reflect what you're saying. I realize that for anyone, any engineers out there, it takes years, maybe even decades, to build up the credentials and the skill sets to kind of really be industry recognized to be entrepreneurial. It's very tough otherwise. what I do recognize, and I was kind of a part of it. And in fact, I hired a couple students, through the Venture for Canada program, and then they do have kind of a job list there, and it's or job posting thing there, and they are very good at covering covering the cost, for the wages, to try to promote young professionals such as yourself into the entrepreneurial market. And of course they focus on science and technology. They have special rates, special incentives for women in technology. So if I guess my suggestion to you, and I think they're one of the better programs out there for young professionals, I would try to contact a representative with Venture for Canada. They may be able to help, and I'll just leave it with that.
Okay, Alice, you've made an observation or a question. Do you want to pose it to the group?
Yeah, so always when I hear stories about people can't get jobs, then I wonder about the flexibility of our job market, both from the company side and from the talent side. Are we asking people to fit into pigeon boxes? Or is this just something that as people coming into different industries, we just haven't taught them how to be entrepreneurial about their own skill sets? And I say that as somebody who teaches in the executive MBA program. I work with students to develop projects. And I'm always amazed at how incredibly smart some of our engineers are. And yet they don't even see themselves in a different industry easily.
Ling,
so I think
Ling saw that. I'm going to ask Ling to just jump in right there. Go ahead, Ling.
Oh, I have a son who is 23 years old, just graduated from UFA, and is kind of like looking for a job. And I talked to his friend as well. I tell you, there's a huge difference between generations. So I'm an immigrant. When I first come to this country, I basically look for work, not necessarily for my, equivalent my experience. I start with the bottom, right? I look for something. I understand people ask for experience, but you can start something and build your experience. But with the new generation, seems to be, I have this, I'm entitled for this. It's a lot of entitlement. And I happen to interview some of his friend or classmate. I just don't feel they fit into like our generation of thinking, and this I feel that there's a gap there, and the new people coming to workplace, they basically doing this, put their hands and want something land in their hands, and they don't want to work for it, and that is something I think this is a huge difference now. I guess that's we all have a responsibility to the people sit on this table here, and we educate the next generation. They become like this. So our responsibility now is how to turn them around.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in there because you know how to turn them around. You can give them a lot of carrots. You can try and use all the incentives in the world to modify their behavior, but there's nothing like a shock. Nothing like a little bit of pain. Go talk to the engineers in Calgary, the 100,000 that got thrown out of work, and find out how much they today will tell you how much hustle means. Get out there and get your little fanny moving. Take a job and work up from that job that you take from there. And go ahead, Tom. But you're muted.
Yeah, no, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years and lost 2 partnerships. And before that, I was a filmmaker. And if you think starting a business is tough, trying to get a film made these days is tougher. But anyway, I can remember it's the basic idea of selling the concept of entrepreneurship. And I can remember my last full-time job was working for Access TV as their executive producer, and I can remember waking up one day and I was working for this egomaniac out of Toronto, and he had these great dreams and everything like that. I just could not go another day trying to fulfill his dream and not fulfilling mine, and I had to get on with it really quick because I was getting older. So that's the underlying thing for entrepreneurship, I think, is just being able to follow your own dreams and making that appealing to young people and making it then more possible in our environment here. Environment's huge. Where do ideas come from? Where does innovation come from? It comes from the bigger centers, if you look at the statistics. And so we have to create a bigger center in this small province.
I think we also need to be helping the students become wiser to just what credentials mean. Credentials out of the university is a beginning. It's not an end.
Yeah.
And with that beginning, you're going to have to add the ingredients, which I call hustle, to begin to find out where there's some connection, any connection at all. And that does require some relational skills and some comfort and confidence and some networking. These are not things that they have been learning at the university unless they're getting practicum experiences of what it takes to take knowledge and convert it into something commercial called a living wage or whatever. Go ahead, Greg.
My best advice to young people has been stop looking for a job. You have capabilities, you can provide services, find someone that needs them and say in exchange for a monthly invoice, I will come in and do A, B, and C on a flexible, part-time, full-time basis. As a like, let's not talk about building a business or starting a technology company, but offering your services pursuant to sole proprietorship or a corporation. You can go out and build your job, build your contracts, build your base, build relationships, and be out there playing, and not just sending in resumes looking for full-time jobs.
So shifting now into sort of a wrap-up mode, where are the opportunities in Alberta? I mean, we've talked diversification or resilience. We've talked about some opportunities, whether it be in clean tech or digitization, and Brian had a fair amount to add there, but I'd like to just ask the group as we're into wrap-up, where are the prospects for diversifying Alberta's economy in the future? Are they more government jobs? I mean, Alison Redford tried, or not Alison, whatever, Rachel something or other added 40,000. I don't know whether that added to diversification. It sort of provided some buffer for somebody. Where are the opportunities?
Okay, Perry, let me take a shot here because I've been very quiet, but you know, you need entrepreneurial skills in big companies too. You know, like this is terrible that we haven't mentioned that. I didn't get to be CEO of Syncrude because I had no entrepreneurial skills. And I ran junior achievement for 10 years while I was CEO at Syncrude. My son actually did create his own company while he was taking computer engineering to help him through. He didn't need money. I had enough money, but he just did it because he was in the junior achievement program. So setting up a company was nothing for him. They needed data pro services. And so he was ready permit. He had a business with 12 hours a week and he did it while doing a computer engineering degree. He ended up in Chicago. He's now a banker of all things. He went to the dark side from an engineer to a banker for Northern Trust. You know, so entrepreneurial skills are needed everywhere, and we need to get that through our head. Is my point of view in here. At Careers Next Generation, where we work right directly with the employers and line kids up, they're great opportunities. In the 27 in the what is it now 1997 to 24 years now, I think we've had over 35 skilled trades would go through careers right at fully qualified journey person, and we've helped 500,000 Alberta youth find careers. So you got to be targeted, and the jobs are out there. And my concern right now is if we don't get employers realizing they got to invest in our youth, and that we're gonna have the worst of both worlds in less than 5 years. We're gonna have a number of young people unemployed, and we're gonna have a shortage of skilled workers. And we're back looking to how do we bring temporary foreign workers in, you know, and that's a crying shame. And so that's why we made this commitment and are working so hard to get 6,000. We'll do it, but it's going to be a hell of a change. And that means we're now in 500 schools and high schools around the province. We got to get in over 1,000. And the great opportunities, if you want to know, is women in the trades. You know, they're 50% of our population. Why aren't women? We got about 10% of our skilled journey people are women. We work with Women Building Futures, great group. And the other great opportunity, even though we've had some success so far, but nowhere near enough, is Indigenous people. And they're the fastest growing group in the age group. So, like 20% of the youth in Edmonton today are Aboriginal. Do you know that?
Yeah. Yes.
We will have more Aboriginal people or Indigenous people in Edmonton than any other city in Canada. So not percentage wise, I think Winnipeg will stay ahead of us, but and so that's where there's a talent opportunity, but the industry needs the skills. We created an ICT model that we run, and that internship we got it funded through the Royal Bank of Canada, and it's totally lined up with their future launch thing, and they just doubled their investment careers, and we got every one of those kids. Somebody else said that every one of those young people are getting jobs. Today, we always have a student come to our board meeting. Today, we had this young man, he's 19. He was, his name is Chris Shaw. We ran a digital skills academy as a pilot up in Fort Murray. He's the one at the age of 17, won a $70,000 scholarship. He's now finishing his first or second year at University of Waterloo. He's got his own company. I mean, we got young people out there that are ready to do it. And, and I just find, after all these years working, that employers need to realize that they're not doing a corporate donation. This is an investment in the youth, and it's an investment with a very high payback. And our future prosperity, as you credited me for saying all the time, Barry, is our youth.
So
that's
what's fascinating in the mosaic of discussion that we've had today, we've touched on the relevance of financing. We've touched on the universities and the colleges. We've certainly made a strong point about the relevance of talent on both sides, on the need of the individuals coming into the industry or coming into jobs to be ready and to be flexible themselves. I mean, we're talking about employees or prospective employees needing to be agile, not just educated, but agile. Mm-hmm. What I find fascinating is when I look around the room or this group, and I see how many of you are not working at necessarily a university, but are working in that infrastructure, that developing infrastructure of NGOs that are recognizing needs in their communities and adapting to make the transition from university or from unemployment to work. I didn't anticipate seeing that today, but you, Brian, and you, Eric, and you, Alice, as part of it, and Greg, I mean, all of you are in some ways contributing to that innovation ecosystem to make Alberta work and to enable the worker to find the work that is relevant for tomorrow. We've talked about financing. We've talked about the acquisition of the appropriate fit of knowledge to the job. We've talked about relational skills. And we talked about leadership, whether it be at the top where Justin is, or whether it be at the bottom where Eric is today or where I am. There is no single formula here. It isn't really a system. It's an array of ingredients, resources and processes that care enough about Alberta, its future economy and employment, to each of us making a difference every day. Alice, did you want to add any point there?
Yeah, this is my reaction whenever we talk about innovation, ecosystem, and government in the same sentence, is that the whole point of an ecosystem is that we have different nodes, different people, different organizations, where they are doing what they see as important with the resources available to them. That's what makes it a system. Well, I think we, as soon as we say organize the ecosystem, I get all shivers down my spine, because then we lose the flexibility, right? So
Peter made that point, and I had an argument this morning with someone about the word ecosystem, saying we should abandon it. We're talking about a market. Markets are not ecosystems.
I love markets. Yeah,
And
see, I even made a note to myself. How do we
So-
ensure that whether we're talking about government policy
Yeah.
or corporations being entrepreneur, or whatever, let's make sure we keep the market mentality, the market mechanisms
Yeah.
approach, because that is the most flexible, the fastest way to see which way the wind is blowing and adjust how we allocate our efforts.
Markets are hard to argue how they work because they just happen. They just work. The markets evolve out of supply, demand, and one way or another, the pieces begin to come into place. As opposed to that top down, we got the answer right, us intellectuals or whatever, and we're going to impose it upon all of you, and you will have to fit our support.
Barry, we're not top down, we're bottom.
Well,
Bottom up.
the word that came to mind, and I hadn't anticipated this, Alice or Peter Justy early on, you used it. We're talking about a culture.
That's
We're
right.
talking about a cultural entrepreneurship, a culture of hard work, a culture of continuous learning, a culture of dynamism. That we are in an environment with lots of shocks and lots of changes. That's life. That's life. That's what makes life so exciting, is that constant adaptation to the challenges.
Hey, Perry, Tom
Yeah.
Dodd trying to get a word in here.
I'm going to let him go. He's between you and I on the screen. So go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'm looking right at Tom, so
Go ahead, Tom.
I'm feeling bad. He's waving his hand and no one's paying attention.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying that, my dream was, and I got into the app business and was in it for 12, 13 years, still am. But my dream was to hire these young students from NAITS and the university and whatnot. And I'll tell you, the people we got from the university were just first rate. And that computer science program and computer engineering program are just first rate. But the profs, if you ask them, they'll say, none of the kids have jobs here. They're going down to Silicon Valley. They're going to Toronto and other places, Vancouver, but they're not here. They're not staying here,
Well, it's conceivable, and I think the universities need to ask this question. Maybe Eric, you want to jump in here, but maybe in some instances we were overtraining and over specializing people where the job opportunities are only going to be in more mature economies. And getting a PhD in nuclear physics doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get a job in Alberta.
Yeah.
Can I just intervene? All our studies indicate that if you want stickiness coming out of the higher levels of education, that the co-op programs are vital.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that, Brian.
and
I think that's what the NGOs, Brian, what you and Eric and Alan, what we've all been reinforcing as it relates to talent is the after university or during university experience. We got to get some reality in front of everybody, the instructors as well as the students.
so and the co-op programs, as you know, are during education.
Right.
And that does give connection and bridges and stickiness to high talent. And anything that you good people with your influences and the community working together to extend and expand and enhance co-op programs, I think is vital to the lifeblood of where we're going to go.
Well, that's a good point to think about wrapping up. There are a number of people who are on the screen who really haven't raised a question or made an observation. Yogi, raise your hand if there's somebody's having a war in the background there. Okay, it's quieted. Yogi, any last comments you're going to make as we're breaking up? Yogi, Tam, Kevin, Mel? Go ahead. Go ahead, Yogi.
Yeah.
So it seems like we have quite an in-depth entrepreneurial.
Blair, you want to mute everybody but Yogi?
This, in a way, is related.
When I listen to all the discussion and look at the resumes of the august participants that we have here today, it seems to me that we have a considerable entrepreneurial support ecosystem. And I think I'm excited about that because I don't think we're spending a lot of money on it compared to some other things we spend money on as a society. However, what can we point to that this is
Right now, no.
letting people
No, because I'm hurting.
flounder? Barry, you want to turn off your microphone? please? Thank you. So I don't know if anybody caught that. I'm just impressed by the ecosystem that we do have. Do we have any measures on how effective it is, as opposed to doing less or nothing? Can we compare ourselves to people who do a lot less and say that we're growing more, we're developing our talent, we're using our talent?
Yogi, I'll jump in there because I think Peter may have some evidence. Certainly the survey that we've been doing since 2015, twice a year, does indicate that we're making some headway in the development of that innovation culture, if you will. And the primary reason appears to be people are increasingly aware of its relevance. And that is, we as a society, as a culture, as a province, mom and pop from Rimby to the presidents of universities are increasingly aware that the economy is important and that there are things that need to be done at the individual and at the institutional level to begin to become more nimble, more opportunistic, and to hustle a little bit more than simply championing, I know, I have a certificate.
Before we exit, this is just Kevin calling again, saying something. There's two things that need to be really focused on, and they're kind of conflated, which is probably not the best way. Is there's the long-term drivers, the markets, and then the short-term interests and resources available. And so we need to kind of have those aligned, because if your long-term projects, if the long-term needs aren't in line with your short-term goals, then eventually you're going to run out. So I think every conversation should have this: where are we shooting for, and then how are things that we're doing contributing to that and accomplishing the short-term goals of jobs at the same time. Because you find yourself wandering around, trying a whole bunch of things when the whole world is actually running off, and then you wake up later and you go, oh my goodness, that's where everybody was heading.
Well, good observations of the distinction between being in a business and keeping your eye on the economy, or running with a short-term perspective versus a long-term perspective. Those that can think quick and act long have an advantage. There are very few in the stock market today that were there 50 years ago, or that those who were 50 years ago are not there today. It is a challenge to be able to.
For me, it's just the sustainability. We have global aging, we have environmental catastrophes, we have all of these drivers. And if we're not aligned with some of those, our economy can't flourish.
Look, we used to do environmental scanning annually. Now we almost do it daily. Justin, any last minute comments you want to share with us as the featured presenter today?
Thank you, Perry. Thank you for the invitation. Great discussion. Learned a lot today. Just reinforce one of the points that was made earlier. We do, and I made this point earlier as well, we do have an entrepreneurial culture in this province. I fear we're losing it to some degree. And I'm not sure what to do about that. You look at how the direction of Europe's gone, how other provinces in this country are gone. I don't want to see that future for us. I want to preserve that entrepreneurial culture that has made this province great. And we've had a lot of troubling times. We all need to work together to preserve it. And, discussions like this are really helpful. So thank you. Thank you very much, Perry.
Well, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Peter. And thank you as our special guest, Brian. Justin, it was delightful. I've had a good time. I hope all of you did too. I hope you've learned a little bit. And I hope you're ready to share these learnings with others. So let's call it a day. For those that want to hang around and have an after party, you're welcome. But other than that,